It's Friday, everyone. What do we do on Fridays here at the Hint Hive? That's right, we smash the patriarchy. Well, hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Hint Hive, amplifying women's voices. I'm your host, Kelly Hint, Queen Bee of this hive, your feminist life coach and psychotherapist, here to shake up the conversation around identity, gender, and the evolving landscape of femininity. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that challenges everything we've been told about gender roles, expectations, and what it truly means to embrace the feminine, beyond the binary. If you've ever questioned what femininity means outside of social norms, if you felt like the rigid definitions of gender don't fully capture who you are, or if you simply want to expand your understanding of identity and inclusion, then you're in the right place. Let's get into it. All right, before I start, I'm just going to put a little disclaimer out there, or I don't know, more of a snarky comment. This is an episode aimed at clarifying and providing information around binary/non-binary issues. I don't care what your thoughts are on people who identify as non-binary. If you flood my inbox with your hate and your rigid nonsense about gender, I don't want to hear it. I truly don't, because I'm not putting this podcast out there so that people can educate me on their bigoted views. I am simply trying to provide a little bit of education and information for people who are interested in understanding, not people who are interested in fighting with me. Okay? Got that? I'm going to be a little bit of a jerk about that because I work with people every day in my therapy practice and my coaching business who identify as non-binary, and I have zero interest in hearing your hatred about that position, about your position on who they are and how they choose to identify. I'm not asking anyone to agree or disagree with gender roles, gender identity, none of that. I hope that if you found this podcast, it's because you're interested not only in empowering yourself as a woman, because this podcast is devoted to women, but also maybe as a woman to trying to understand people who don't align with such binary views. And I'm also going to put it out there. I kind of feel like the reason why we have so many people identifying as non-binary is because of this rigid BS about gender roles and about gender identity. All the people out there who are saying there are only two genders, that's actually not a scientific fact. There's all kinds of complexities that go into gender. People, the world is not as black and white as you want it to be. And I feel like our non-binary friends are really just examples of that, about how not everything and not everyone needs to fit into a nice little box. So if you do not have an open mind, if you are not interested in simply learning a little bit more, receiving a little bit of information, I encourage you to go find a different podcast, because that's not what I'm about here. I'm not trying to force anything down anyone's throat. I'm simply here trying to help people understand things that we don't always understand. And I will be very blunt. I was born and assigned as a female at birth. I have all of the parts of a female. Some of them don't work anymore because my baby house is broken because I'm an old lady. But you know what? That's okay. And so as a female whose insides and outsides match, and I'm very comfortable in that, I cannot relate to living inside of a body that doesn't feel like it matches what people tell me I am. Okay, so I'm putting that right out there. I cannot identify with a non-binary person or a trans person in that I am female and I feel female. However, that does not mean that I cannot provide fabulous services to the non-binary and transgender people that I work with. That also doesn't mean that I'm going to judge people who are different than me. And it also doesn't mean that I'm going to be a jerk. And so I'm just asking for anyone listening, whether you understand gender identity issues or not, please just try to have an open mind and find some compassion for people who don't fit into your neat little box. All right, enough of the lecture. So let's start with a little reality check, shall we? For centuries, femininity has been boxed into a very specific mold, one that is often centered on softness, nurturing, and appearance-based validation. But guess what? Femininity is not owned by any one gender. It is not restricted to simply cis women. And it's definitely not something that only exists in opposition to masculinity. Stay with me for a second, right? And this is one of the things where I can identify myself personally with some of the issues related to people who identify as non-binary or trans. For example, I don't subscribe to the gender roles assigned to women. I believe that if I don't want to dress in a feminine way, I shouldn't have to. Like, seriously, who came up with that nonsense? Who says that I have to love the color pink, right? So this is where I can agree with my friends who identify differently than I do regarding their gender. And historically, honestly, many cultures have recognized gender fluidity. Indigenous communities, such as the two-spirit identities in many Native American tribes, have long acknowledged that gender exists beyond male and female. And the Hijira communities in South Asia, and apologies if I mispronounced that, non-binary shamans in various traditions and even ancient mythologies remind us that gender diversity is nothing new. It's just that Western colonialism pushed the binary system onto us, and along with that, gender roles. Now, fast forward to today, and we are still unlearning centuries of rigid thinking. Many non-binary individuals, trans folks, and gender-expansive people have been reclaiming femininity on their own terms. And I, for one, am all there for it. I mean, this is revolutionary because it dismantles the patriarchal ideal that femininity is weak or secondary. In truth, femininity is powerful, dynamic, and resilient, no matter who embodies it. Think about it. Think about a cisgender man. And for those who don't understand the term cisgender, as I'm using it, it is somebody who is, for example, a man who is assigned male at birth. He has all male parts and all that fun stuff. So that cisgender, right? Wow. I totally lost my train of thought there. Sorry about that. Um, okay, here we go. I'm back. Um, so you've got your cisgender male, and he appears to have some feminine traits, right? But he's not gay. He's not trans. This is like, some people don't understand this. And this is where, like, I hate when the term sissy is thrown around to regarding a man who is in touch with his emotions and can cry, right? Like, this is what I'm talking about. We need to get rid of this rigid system, because I, as a female, I identify as a female. I was born and assigned as a female. I have some masculine traits. And guess what? I'm perfectly fine with that. Absolutely fine with it. We all have leanings of feminine traits and leanings of masculine traits. And again, the fact that there's a binary in there at all, it drives me crazy. But, I suppose it's one of the necessary evils. We do have to label and categorize things and people and situations, and I hate labels, but sometimes they are necessary. All right, I will stop my rambling, and let's move on to embracing non-binary feminine narratives. So, what does it mean to embrace femininity beyond gender? By the way, saying the word femininity over and over is probably going to cramp my tongue up. Anyway, so embracing femininity beyond gender means decoupling femininity from womanhood. And that is acknowledging that anyone, regardless of their gender identity, can embrace aspects of femininity, like I was saying, right? And then rejecting the hierarchy of gender traits. This is the understanding that softness, intuition, and emotional intelligence are not lesser than logic, strength, or assertiveness. They are all equally valuable. And this is where the constant comparing, like centering men and then anyone other than man is less than. We've got to get away from that. And then creating space for non-binary and gender-expansive people in feminist spaces. This is because true feminism, modern feminism, is about liberation, not exclusion. Because thankfully, feminists have learned from the mistakes of our past. And then celebrating diverse expressions of femininity, whether that looks like wearing makeup, embracing vulnerability, or stepping into leadership roles with grace and assertiveness. And let's be real, patriarchy thrives when we enforce rigid gender roles. When we say this is for women and this is for men, we reinforce the very structures that keep us all limited. And I would say that my very own podcast does that to an extent, because my goal is to empower women and amplify women's voices, right? So I'm unfortunately, it's part of the way that I have to push against the patriarchy. I'm using their own rigidity against them. And honestly, true empowerment comes from allowing people to define their own identities on their own terms. That's why intersectionality is key in feminism. We need to uplift everyone's experiences, not just the ones that fit neatly into the binary of male versus female. All right, so let's talk action. Because, as always, awareness is great, but real change comes from what we do with it, not just what we're yapping about. So here are some ways that we can start deconstructing gender and making space for a more inclusive understanding of femininity. The first, as always, is challenging your own biases. We have all been conditioned to think in binary terms. Start noticing when you assume someone's gender or associate certain traits with either male or female. And then the next step is to use inclusive language. Terms like pregnant people instead of pregnant women can be like small shifts that make a big difference in recognizing non-binary identities. And then support non-binary and trans voices. Follow content creators, read books, and engage with people who challenge the gender binary. I'm telling you, working with transgender and non-binary people in my practice has really opened up my mind and helped me to think differently, to think in different terms. An example of that was my husband and I, several years ago, we went to a car dealership and there was a person there who assisted us initially whose gender identity could have been stereotyped as, oh, I think she's female, but maybe she's dressing as a man, right? And so when my husband was talking to a salesperson, he said, the woman that helped us before, that's how he described this person. And so like after the salesperson had walked away, I said to my husband, I said, you don't know how that person identifies. And he said to me, well, I didn't know how else to describe that person. And I said, all you had to do was say the person who helped us before. And you could have even pointed at that person. Because again, like we always make these assumptions. And I never would have thought in those terms before, but after working with people who are non-binary, I have started to, again, like expand and push back against what I have been taught. And then one of the next things that you can do is redefine femininity for yourself. What parts of femininity resonate with you? How do you want to embody it, regardless of how society has packaged it? And then, of course, have conversations. Talk to friends, family, and colleagues about gender fluidity and the spectrum of identity. Awareness spreads through dialogue. And P.S., congratulations for making it this far into the episode, because you're doing just this. You are doing exactly as I'm asking, as I'm suggesting, as far as how you can be part of the solution, not the problem. You are consuming content right now that is potentially increasing your awareness and maybe even inducing some compassion. Who knows? And then amplify gender expansive role models. So sharing stories of individuals breaking gender norms and help normalize the idea that femininity is for everyone. And then if you are really serious about being active on this issue, advocate for policy changes. Support policies that recognize non-binary identities, including gender-neutral language on official documents. Doesn't sound that hard, right? And it's really not hurting anyone. The assumptions that we make about gender and gender roles, that is what is hurting people. And I've said this before. I don't know if I've said it on the podcast before, but I've definitely said it in conversations with people. I have had discussions where I believe that if there weren't such rigid roles assigned to gender, I wonder if there would even be the need for labels of male, female, non-binary, and transgender. When we keep trying to shove people into that stupid box, I feel like that's what breeds all of this. When you try to say, even for me, to be honest, like as a cisgender female, when somebody tries to tell me what my gender role is, what I'm supposed to be doing, thinking, feeling as a woman, oh, let me tell you, I want to push back against that and say, really? Watch this. How about this for being feminine, right? If I heard one more time throughout my life, oh, that's not very ladylike. Do you know? Ugh. I really wanted to do very mean things to people that said that to me, because that was said to me quite often because I, again, didn't always fit into the gender stereotypes of being a female. Okay, if you've listened to other episodes, you know that I love ending these episodes with something powerful for you to chew on and think about after you're done listening. And this week's quote comes from the legendary Alok Vaid-Menon. And again, you know I struggle with pronunciation sometimes, so apologies. So Alok states, "Gender is a story that we have been told, but stories can change." Boom! Mic drop, right? People, it is about time to write a new story. One where everyone gets to show up as their full, authentic selves, no matter where they land on the spectrum. All right, Hive, you know what you've got to do. And as always, if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And let's keep the conversation going in our Hint Hive Facebook group, or even dive deeper into these conversations over at the Facebook group. That's a space where we create safety and room for real talk, real support, and real change. And if you're loving the podcast, I would love it if you would leave a review, because it helps amplify our voices even more. Until next time, my fabulous Hive, stay bold, stay curious, and most importantly, stay you. Until next time, keep buzzing with that badass energy. See you soon. This podcast is powered by Kelly Hint Empowerment Coaching, as well as Kelly M. Hint LMHC and The Cranky Counselor. To find out more about coaching services, head over to CoachKellyHint.com. If you'd like to know more about the psychotherapy services I offer to individuals within the state of New York, you can check out KellyMHint.com. And if you'd like to learn more about aromatherapy, you can check out TheCrankyCounselor.com.